Hey everyone, today it's a first for my channel. We're doing an XCOM Chimera Squad challenge run, and the rules are pretty simple. We're playing on expert difficulty, and we're not going to use guns in combat a single time. Now regular viewers may notice there's no honest man rule, and that's because Chimera Squad works a bit differently to the mainline games. There is no permadeath here. If a soldier goes down, we need to stabilize them before they go to the Shadow Realm. Failure to do so will give an automatic game over. If all our team goes into bleed out in a mission, it's also an automatic game over. So I am going to allow myself to restart missions in the event of failure, and I'll keep a count of how many reloads were required because of losses throughout the run. The first decision to make is our starting squad. If we skip the tutorial, we can actually pick what 4 starting operatives we want. I go for Cherub, who can use his Shield Bash as a decently powerful melee attack, plus his kinetic shield ability can prevent us from taking damage, and I figure that's something we're going to need. Patchwork has her Gremlin that can use electrocution attacks, and I'm thinking this is going to be one of the few methods we have to actually make ranged attacks. Plus, Patchwork is probably my favourite soldier in the game from a purely utility standpoint. She's incredibly powerful and should hold up well even without being able to use her gun. Torque is the third option. Her bind and poison attacks make her possibly the best unit in the game for this particular run, so she's a no-brainer. And finally we go with Zephyr. Now I've never been able to make good use of her in the past, but for this run I'm thinking she's perfect. She doesn't actually carry a gun at all. She just uses punches and kicks on the battlefield. She's built for melee use, and that's going to be very helpful for us. There are some other agents which should be helpful, but we can only start with 4, so this is who we're going with. On the first mission, it becomes clear just how limited our breaching options are going to be. Zephyr is the only one who can actually attack, everyone else just has to use cover rush. And while this isn't great, it's not horrible either. Cover rush not only guarantees that we'll never be forced to use a gun attack during breaching, and that makes the run actually possible, but it also helps us avoid taking damage as we initiate the fight. In terms of items, I've equipped Patchwork with a flashbang and everyone else with medikits. Since Patchwork has a ranged attack, she should hopefully be able to stay in cover most of the time. The rest of the team, they're going to be using a lot of melee attacks. I'm thinking they're going to be more exposed, so they're probably going to take quite a bit of damage, and being able to heal is going to be very helpful. And the really cool thing about utility items in this game is that using them is a free action. And as the gameplay starts, I should cover the mods I have installed. There's cost-based ability colours, which is always a great mod to have. I've got another one that shows numerical values for HP, so we don't have to count health bars. And the last one does actually affect gameplay. Captures are okay. In the vanilla game, apparently our soldiers don't gain XP for knocking an enemy unconscious. We only get XP if we outright Shadow Realm the bad guys. Now given we're supposed to be playing as law enforcement, I just find it crazy that the game would actively discourage players from taking the criminals alive. If anything, we should get more XP for keeping them alive. It's literally our job. Normally I like to keep the gameplay the same as vanilla in my challenge runs, but I made an exception in this case because the vanilla mechanics are just really silly in my opinion. Now as we begin the second encounter of the first mission, for those not in the know, Chimera Squad uses a turn system similar to something like Baldur's Gate 3. It's not the player turn, then the enemy turn. Each individual unit gets loaded into the turn queue and takes their turn individually. The order our units move in will correspond to the order that we deploy them in during the breach. So it's nice we have some control over which of our soldiers act first. In the early game, I'm generally going with Cherub first, Torque second, and then Zephyr and Patchwork either third or fourth. Cherub's kinetic shield is really good to start with. We can assess the battlefield and give a shield to whichever of our units we think is in the most vulnerable position before any of the enemies get to act. Torque is also really good as she basically allows us to shut down an enemy of choice with bind, and of course shutting them down early in the fight works to our advantage. Now Patchwork and Zephyr are mainly for damage dealing, so it's not as important for them to go early in the turn order. Now that may change for Patchwork after she learns Stasis, but we're a ways off that. In terms of enemy priority, when I play this game I'm always asking myself a question. Which enemy is acting next, and can I shut them down or eliminate them before their turn? If I can, I'm probably making them the priority. If I can't, I'm going to ignore that unit and instead focus on the earliest acting enemy that I will be able to deal with in time. Denying the enemy as many actions as possible is the key to victory in Chimera Squad. So the first mission goes off pretty well, and afterwards we immediately get a 5th squad mate. We can choose one from a random selection of 3, and in this instance I think Axiom is the obvious choice. He has a built-in melee attack and that's going to come in really useful. Terminal's healing abilities could be good, but she would have very limited options for offense, and that makes her, I think, one of the least useful units for this particular challenge run. Shelter does have a psionic attack he can use, but he has to level up to get it, so at the start he's going to be quite useless. I'm thinking we may try and pick him up later if we can, but for right now Axiom is our go-to. That being said, I'm not actually going to use the big boy in combat just yet. For right now he's just going to help us with things like covert ops and research. See, Axiom has a rage mechanic that's unique to him. When his rage builds too high, he has a chance to attack enemies as a free action. Now, this sounds good in theory. The problem is, if there are no enemies within melee range, he'll actually shoot at them with his gun instead. And he does this automatically, it's not a player-controlled action. So I don't want to use him in battle until after we have a mind shield that we can equip on him. That will completely negate the chance of going berserk. And this is also the reason that I started with the Progeny faction first, as that will give us the quickest access to mind shields. On the second mission, I try to use Torque to bind one of the enemies, but it turns out she cannot use bind from a diagonal tile. Now I'm pretty sure I did know that, I had just forgotten. Anyway, that's going to mean our only option is to use the Subdue ability. Now this is a melee attack that most units have access to, so at the very least, even for the mostly useless soldiers like Terminal, Subdue is always an option. So there is no unit in this game who's going to be 100% useless. There's always that melee attack as a fallback, even though it's often not very good. Its base damage is 2 to 3, and of course we roll minimum damage here and the criminal survives. I mean, it's an XCOM game, what do you expect to happen? Then the bad guys start ganging up on Torque. Now it makes sense, she is flanked, and she actually goes into bleed out from all these attacks. Now the way this works, we have 3 rounds of combat to stabilize her, or she goes to the Shadow Realm and it's an instant game over. Thankfully we are able to stabilize her just fine, but she's picked up a major wound after the mission. The only way to remove this is by sending her into the training center, and that will mean that she's not available for deployment for a few days. Given I don't want to use Axiom in combat just yet, we can't really afford to do that. Now the wound is giving her a dodge penalty. Initially her dodge stat isn't great anyway, so as much as leaving the wound in place triggers my OCD, we're just gonna have to ignore it for now. We really don't have any other options. Before too long that does change though, as we actually pick up a 6th squad member. The game hands them out quite often early on, but that will change as the game progresses. With our choices here, I'm thinking Claymore and Verge are both decent. They're not great, they're not horrible. Godmother, on the other hand, is competing with Blue Blood as the most useless unit for this run. Pretty much all of her offense involves using her gun, so we're definitely not taking her. Ultimately, I go with Claymore. I think he'll start off not very useful, but if we can level him up a bit and gain access to his stronger abilities, he could become a really good addition to the team. And at the very least, using this guy means that we can put Torque into the training center. Now we have a random mission here, and I thought this was worth mentioning. As we're setting up for Breach, the game gives us what would normally be a nice little bonus here. The last unit through this entrance automatically activates Overwatch. Now in a regular run, that's free Overwatch, free potential damage, it's a good thing. Here, well, it could cause us to fail the entire challenge. So I have two takeaways from this. Firstly, we really need to get a breaching charge. That would allow us to use the other entrance and ignore the automatic Overwatch. And in general, the more breaching items we have, the more options at our disposal during Breach. That's what we're gonna need. The second takeaway is that this is why Zephyr is so good for this run. We can deploy her as the final unit through this entrance, and since she doesn't have a gun, we don't have to worry about Overwatch. The run remains alive. As we head into, I think, the third story mission of the Progeny faction, we've got a few things working in our favour. Firstly, we have enhanced armour. This not only gives us an HP buff, it allows us to carry a second utility item. Not that we can afford to do that on most soldiers, supplies are kinda tight right now, but it is going to be very helpful later down the track. The second good thing is that we've unlocked armour enhancements, so Torque has Macweave to boost her dodge, and Zephyr has an attachment that gives her an even further HP boost. All of these things are going to help keep our troops alive. Good defense in this run is important since we are going to come under attack, probably a lot. Now as we breach, Cherub can use the Phalanx ability once per mission now. That will negate one of the aggressive enemy's attacks. Meanwhile, Torque can use Poison Spit. Now this is really good since it not only gives us free poison damage, if we use it on an aggressive enemy, the poison will actually lower their accuracy as they attack. And it's nice just being able to do something other than cover rush. Zephyr takes up position on the front line with her breach attack, so I use Kinetic Shield with Cherub to protect her. I'm expecting the enemies are gonna attack her, but they actually don't. They go after Torque instead. The bad guys really seem to not like her this run. I guess they know how powerful she is. Meanwhile, Patchwork has finally picked up Stasis, and this is just as broken as it is in XCOM 2. It's only one action, it doesn't end the turn, it shuts down an enemy for an entire round of combat. It's just so good. Zephyr, for her part, has gained the perk for +1 damage to her melee attacks, and it was between choosing that and essentially this game's version of the Bladestorm ability. Now it's a tough choice for sure, but Zephyr doesn't get any upgraded weapons, so I figure she needs all the damage output she can get. Anyway, she should be doing a minimum of 5 damage, and I thought melee attacks ignored armor in this game. But this sorcerer survives the attack, even though it shouldn't have, even with minimum damage. And it turns out this chick needs a level up ability for her attacks to ignore armor. Now Subdue, the ability the other units have, that ignores armor by default. So the character who is melee oriented doesn't bypass armor with melee attacks by default, but the rest of the soldiers do. That is certainly a design choice. Now Torque is also more powerful since Poison Spit gives us a powerful AoE attack, and it doesn't end the turn either, so she can potentially poison a bunch of guys and still bind somebody in one turn. And honestly, things are going really well so far. The unique operatives of this game seem to be lending themselves to this challenge much better than in XCOM 2. In the second encounter, we have a quick snare debuff. This one is quite bad. It immobilizes one of our troops for the first round of combat. Now, given we're so reliant on melee attacks, that's a bad nerf to have. I opt to send Patchwork in first, so she'll be the one stuck in place. Our chaining jolt ability is a ranged attack, and it always hits, so she's kind of the least reliant on having good positioning. Unfortunately, our girl gets caught in a psionic suplex. Now the acolyte trapping her has barely any health, so at first I'm thinking this is fine. We can move in with Cherub to use the shield bash and take it out. However, he's one tile short of being able to land the melee. So close, just not close enough. And that's a real problem. But I was impressed with myself here. Instead of using the shield bash, I use kinetic shield on Patchwork. This way, even though we cannot break her out of the suplex, we can avoid having her take any damage from it. She's then able to get her revenge and take down the acolyte herself. So maybe an unconventional approach here, but it worked really well. Alright, now the final encounter. We need to keep the enemies out of the red area here. And that's easier said than done because they actually start closer to that location than we do. By now we have picked up a stun grenade as a mission reward, and I was hoping to use it here, but unfortunately we just don't have the angle to throw it through the doorway into the enemies. So in order to get a better throwing angle, I just send a Cherub out of cover with no shield. What could possibly go wrong? Well, the next enemy enters the red tiles and shoots him in the chest. So that's not ideal, but in some good news, I'm able to use Zephyr's crowd control ability for the first time in my life. Got a Steam achievement here. And, well, you can see it in action. It's pretty good. It's essentially an AoE melee attack, and I'm down with that. We do still have the enemy in the red area though, and what we're going to do about that is use Torque, who can tongue pull that criminal scum right out of there. I think if we had left him there any longer we might have auto-failed the mission, but as it stands, this one's gone well. Afterwards we have a choice of dark events to counter, and both of them are absolutely foul. We're either dealing with codexes or flashbang grenades. I opt to counter the flashbangs as that sounds slightly less horrible. So check this out. The Progeny's deploying flashbangs. Now I'm a little confused by this. I guess you select the dark event you want to trigger rather than the one you want to block. So that's a bit of a weird way to do it, but the more you know, I guess. Anyway, we're using Claymore here as Torque is in training. We can use the training center not only to get rid of injuries, but also to learn new buffs and abilities. And I figure right after a story mission is a good time to train our top soldiers up. Torque should be finished training before the next story mission, at which point she'll be available for deployment again. In the meantime, the random missions we're going on are usually only 1 or 2 encounters versus the full 3, so they're good missions to bring the lower level troops on since they're a bit easier. And the thing I hadn't realised about Claymore is just how slow he is. Now thankfully he's not reliant on melee as he can throw shrapnel bombs. The way these work is they detonate a few turns later after he throws them. So if we chuck them at enemies that are a long way down in the turn order, we can ensure that those guys won't be able to get out of the blast zone before it goes boom. Alternatively, if we want to blow something up immediately, we can throw the shrapnel bomb with Claymore's first action. This will not end the turn. And then, if he's equipped with a utility grenade like a frag or a plasma, he can throw that straight after and detonate the shrapnel bomb instantly. And it's a double explosion. We get the shrapnel bomb and the grenade. Now, of course, utility grenades are limited use, so we're not going to be able to do that every single turn, but it can come in helpful when we really need it. Torque returns for the next mission, while Cherub is now the one training. And we encounter a scenario I've been praying would not occur since before I even started the run. This is like a worst case scenario here. See, this mission has only one breaching point, so we're gonna have to use that entrance. And the buff that we get, well, it's a potential run ender. All units through this door automatically enter Overwatch once combat starts. Yeah, not just one unit like last time, the whole squad. So how the heck are we gonna avoid using guns here? The moment one of those enemies moves, somebody's gonna get an Overwatch. So here's how it's gonna work. Whoever we place at the front of the breach will have the first turn of combat, so their Overwatch will disappear instantly before they have a chance to use it. We don't have to worry about them. Additionally, Zephyr cannot Overwatch, so if we put her in the 2nd to 4th positions, we're now down to only 2 soldiers we have to worry about, Patchwork and Talk. Claymore's the one I'm going to use first, and you'll see why in a second. The big man still has his frag grenade, and I decide the only way to remove the Overwatch is to lob it into our own units. Taking damage removes Overwatch, so the run has thankfully been saved. Once again, unconventional, but it works. And I can't help but wonder what the Progeny guys are thinking as they see this. The cops charge into the building and just start immediately throwing grenades at each other rather than the criminals. But hey, we're still able to win the mission, we've just taken a bit of extra damage. Then we have the final Progeny encounter, so we're back to the usual 4 troops. We want to bring our best for this one, it's going to be pretty difficult. I use a smoke bomb with Patchwork and Phalanx with Cherub. Normally I like to avoid using these consumable items and abilities on the first encounter, but I think burning through them is a better alternative than taking damage. And the breach goes really well. We only take a single point of damage with Talk, and given how many aggressive enemies are here, that is a great outcome. So I think I made the right call. Now I haven't talked about the team up ability. This is a once per mission use skill that lets us move any unit we want to the next spot in the turn queue. It is crazy powerful, but again, in these long missions, I'd like to hang on to it for as long as possible. Once we use it up, it's gone. However, in this scenario, I'm going to use it on the very first turn of combat to give Zephyr the next turn. She's in a really exposed position, and by letting her go next, she'll be able to set up a parry which will help her avoid taking damage. Sadly, parry doesn't protect her from psionic suplex, so my plan ends up being a bit of a fail. It's not all bad though, we do have a great combo here. Talk can use tongue pull to bring one of the acolytes towards us, and because Patchwork is nearby, she hits this guy for free damage just by him entering the space around her. This ability is known as Voltaic Arc, and it is truly a glorious thing. See, with that extra damage, Talk's bind finishes the acolyte off instantly, and placing Patch and Talk next to each other in this manner can be a really powerful strat. Zephyr does get hit by a Muton while she's in the suplex position, but we can use the Cherub shield strat again to protect her from the suplex itself. Zephyr gets some revenge by attacking the acolyte, but he doesn't take the parry bait. He ignores Zephyr and hits Patchwork instead. Now thankfully the Muton does attack Zephyr and she blocks all the damage with parry. We're then able to win the first encounter without taking any further hits. In the second encounter, Patchwork is able to use her personal space attack to hit a Codex and its clone. Now sadly she rolls minimum damage on both hits, so they both survive. It was worth a try though. And the thing is, she can then hit 2 enemies with her Chaining Jolt ability, so one of the Codexes goes down anyway. Yeah, Patchwork is really good. In the final encounter, there's I think 3 of these devices that give the Progeny units shield points. Now they've been here the whole mission, but there's more of them in this final encounter, so they're a bit more of a problem. Now thankfully the Thralls don't seem to benefit from them, so those guys are pretty much a guaranteed one-shot when we attack them. Also, since it's the final encounter, we don't have to worry about saving any consumables. We're gonna go all out here, use every resource we have to make this fight as easy as we can. Cherub can use his shock grenade to shut down one of the enemies while eliminating another. And I find focusing on low HP enemies first is often a good idea. Getting rid of them quickly will mean they don't have much opportunity to attack, and that's going to mean we take less damage. For the higher HP opponents, Talk using Bind to shut them down can often be a good approach. And while she's doing exactly that, the Codex drops a psionic bomb on her. But this actually works in our favour. See, Cherub can give a kinetic shield to Talk so she's safe from the psionic bomb. Meanwhile, the sorcerer she has bound is going to take full damage from it. So the Codex is basically attacking its own guy. The bad guys kind of played themselves with that one. And we soon end up in a scenario where Torque has the Sorcerer shut down, while our other 3 units have only Progeny's leader, Violet, left to deal with. So it's essentially a 3-on-1 handicap match, and we take down the first of the 3 criminal factions without too much trouble. So yeah, run's going really well so far. We're going after Sacred Coil next. There's not any strategic reason for this, I've just never done their scenario second, and the missions do play out a bit differently depending on the order that you investigate each group. So I'm kind of entering unknown territory here. What could possibly go wrong? With the first investigation over, we do obtain another agent at this point. We're able to pick up Shelter. Now, like I said earlier, he's not a great addition, but he's solid, and I think he should be a good backup choice if our main crew are in the training centre or otherwise indisposed. As we begin the second investigation, Patchwork is really good for dealing with Sacred Coil. She can hack the robotic enemies to take control of them. It's a base 91% chance to hack the basic androids, but that doesn't stop us from having to take 3 attempts before we have a successful one. Yeah, definitely a that's XCOM baby moment there. However, on top of that, Chaining Jolt also does extra damage to robotic enemies. So whenever you're taking on Sacred Coil, having Patchwork can make things much easier. I mean, she makes things much easier in general, to be honest. But yeah, especially against Sacred Coil, she's a good counter to have. One interesting thing to note here, and it is going to come up multiple times in this run, see, the mission objective is to destroy this computer, and heavy mechs are going to activate at the end of each round of combat until we do that. But Patchwork's Chaining Jolt can't actually target the device. Subdue doesn't work on environmental structures either. So our options to attack these kind of objects for the whole run are gonna be pretty limited. In this instance, it's left to Zephyr to punch the thing into bits. But yeah, we found one thing Patchwork can't do, it seems. Now the mechs do have their missile attack in this game, just like XCOM 2, but we're rocking master crafted armor by this stage, which is the highest you can get. So we have armor protection, plus we've got oodles of HP. We can tank the blast without issue, and the first story mission for Sacred Coil is really pretty easy. The other thing is that with Progeny defeated, we can now equip Axiom with a mind shield so he can start getting involved in the fights. On top of that, Claymore's also coming into his own. In addition to mind shields, the Progeny research also gives us the relocation disc. This gives him a free movement action that seems to have a further range than his chonky legs. Plus, his frag grenade has been upgraded to a plasma grenade. Between that and his shrapnel bomb, he's able to one-shot 3 enemies all by himself. Just beastly. Axiom, meanwhile, well, he misses an 80% melee attack. So I guess he's still finding his footing. They can't all be winners all the time, right? And honestly, that chance to miss the melee is pretty bad. It happens way more than I would expect it to. But yeah, 80% in an XCOM game. I probably should expect it, shouldn't I? Anyway, thankfully, when he reaches Special Agent rank, he picks up a super useful skill, so that might make him a bit better. That skill is Adrenal Surge. When we activate this, Axiom's Psych Up and Smash abilities have no cooldown. Now, Psych Up is a free action that increases Axiom's rage level by 1 up to its maximum of 5. And if you put those two things together, free action plus no cooldown, well yeah, that means we can max out our rage in a single turn, instantly. Now rage gives Axiom some useful benefits, like his melee attacks being more likely to cause debuffs like disorientation or stun. And while rage does increase the chance of Axiom going berserk, since we have a mind shield on him, that's a non-issue. It's all the positives, none of the negatives, and that's exactly what we want. As for Smash not having a cooldown, well that's his melee attack, but it only costs a single action. Normally it's a turn-ending move, but not when Adrenal Surge has been used. So this big boy can start his turn, instantly max out his rage, and then attack twice in a row. thrice if we combine it with a plasma grenade, which of course we're going to. So yeah, Axiom may not be a perfect soldier, but there's definitely a lot of potential there. We've also picked up Verge by now, who I think will be our final agent we're able to recruit this campaign. And the recruitments have worked out perfectly. Blue Blood, Terminal, and Godmother are the three I wanted to avoid, and we've managed to do exactly that. Now, like Shelter, I don't think Verge is going to be a top guy for this run, but he's a solid backup if we need him. Now, something that I didn't expect to happen is that we're kind of struggling a bit on the strategic layer. That didn't happen at all when I played this game a few months back. Now, the way it works in Chimera Squad is that we have to manage city anarchy. It's essentially this game's version of the Avatar progress. And the way it works is that each region in City 31 has its own panic meter. When that meter fills up, the region will then add 1 bar of progress to the global city anarchy every day. If the city bar fills up, it's game over. Now, in my previous playthrough, anarchy was pretty much a non-issue. And like here, we're still fine, it's not like we're at risk of losing the game or anything, but the city anarchy is slowly rising, so it's gonna require my attention. I think the difference is due to a couple of reasons. One, you can see the map here. We have the majority of the regions that are blue, meaning they have basically zero panic. However, there's some regions that have a great deal of panic, and it seems the enemy factions are really concentrating their efforts. Rather than a lot of regions with a bit of panic, which would be fine, we have a small number of regions with a large amount of panic each. And that's less fine, because that's going to start contributing to that global anarchy. And the thing is, we can run a covert op to counter panic in the regions. It's called humanitarian aid. The issue is, soldiers have to be of at least special agent rank in order to deploy on it. Now, we haven't been using Zephyr too much in combat lately because she's been in training. At this point, I'm thinking she's going to have to take some time away from that to help us get the panic under control. We can send her on a humanitarian aid effort. And I think I started running these particular ops earlier in my previous playthrough, and that would have helped staying on top of the anarchy mechanic. So yeah, it's not a big deal, we can handle it. But I'm thinking long term, we need to level up Verge and Shelter to at least special agent rank, because then they can be going out on those humanitarian aid missions. That will leave Zephyr and our other top level troops available for combat when we need them. As we head into the final Sacred Coil mission, it's actually Torque that's on a covert op. I thought we'd have time for her to finish it up before deployment, but we're off by 1 day. I just miscalculated. And the final mission for each faction works a bit differently to the others. It triggers pretty much instantly after the previous one. There's very little downtime in between. So we're going into this extremely difficult mission without our powerful snack. Cross your fingers, we may need some good luck for this one. What I've learned fighting Sacred Coil by this point is that it's normally best to start the fight with patchwork. Between stasis and reprogram, she can potentially shut down 2 enemies right out of the gate. And with reprogram, not only will the opponent not attack us, it will actually join our side. For this reason, I've also given her the Motile Inducer. This is basically the most powerful item in the game, giving an ally a free extra turn immediately. We generally want to take extra turns as early as possible in the encounter to eliminate as many enemies as quickly as we can. And it's during this mission I realise something. We're down to the last enemy, a Ronin. We can easily finish it with Claymore's sticky grenade, and this does what you'd expect. It attaches an explosive to the target. But look how he uses this attack. He's launching it from some wrist-mounted device. Does this count as a gun? Have I failed this run? Like the shrapnel bombs Claymore just throws with his hands. I had just assumed a sticky grenade works the same way. And the thing is, in this game, often when you use these attacks, the camera is focused on the enemy, so you don't get a great look at your own character's attack animation. And at this point, I wasn't really sure what to do. Like, I could redo the run without using Sticky Grenade. I'm quite confident it wouldn't make any tangible difference to the success we're having. It's a good ability, sure, but it's not super clutch or anything like that. We've used it probably less than 10 times the entire run. So I figure I'm not going to restart the campaign, but I did decide after this mission that I wouldn't use Sticky Grenade for the rest of the run. So yeah, if you want to say the run's illegitimate, that's perfectly fine, but I don't think this is a big deal, so we're just going to carry on, pretend it never happened, but I thought I would mention it for the sake of transparency. Anyway, while I've been ranting, multiple Ronins arrive as reinforcements, and these things really suck. For one, their lightning reflexes prevents them from being harmed by Voltaic Arc when they run up on Patchwork. Plus, they have this ability where after they attack, they don't go to the end of the turn queue. Instead, they move down only a couple of slots, meaning they'll be able to attack again super quickly. Normally, Torque is the best counter to these guys since she can grab one and completely shut it down. But here, they're just wreaking havoc on us. And they're pretty bulky too, they've got a decent amount of health. Now we can defeat them, but we end up taking much more damage than I'm comfortable with, and that's going to make the next encounters more difficult. Speaking of, in the second encounter, I think I make the exact same mistake I made when I played this game a few months back. See, you want to deactivate the psionic gate as quickly as possible, as in on the first turn, because the reinforcements that drop in can be utter trash. But apparently I've forgotten just how bad it is, as I ignore the gate and we end up with an extra Andromedon and couple of chrysalids that we have to deal with. Then when we do eventually shut it down, it blows up on Patchwork. I don't remember it exploding either. I'm thinking maybe I trauma blocked the details of this mission from my mind. It was definitely the hardest part of the game last time I played. Now I do reload here. I'm using a medikit with Zephyr to help out Patch, and I very clearly select Patchwork as the target of the medikit, but Zephyr just heals herself instead. And this does happen from time to time in this game. The unit you're selecting isn't the one that actually gets targeted. It can be really annoying. So it was just some jank, but again, I thought I'd mention it. What's also annoying is the Sacred Coil leader, Bellis Ma. This guy is an even beefier Ronin, and he's just running around causing havoc, getting to attack an insane amount of times. I mean, look at the turn queue here. Bellis appears 3 separate times. That means in the same space that our units get to attack once, this guy is getting 3 separate turns. He is a monster. Also, his attacks cause the rooted status, leaving the target immobile. And guys like Cherub are essentially useless when they can't move. This unending barrage of attacks leads to a Guardian scoring an unlucky crit and sending Cherub into bleed out. Now we can stabilize him just fine in order to avoid a game over, but he's out for the rest of the mission. That means in the third encounter, where a gatekeeper is waiting for us, we're going to have to use an extremely weak android rather than Cherub. So this could be really bad. Before that though, we still need to deal with Bellis. Even though Cherub's down, the shield he placed on Patchwork continues to keep her safe, and before long, Zephyr can take this guy out. So yeah, we've persevered, but really tough battle here. I should have shut down the psionic gate faster, that would have made a big difference. Anyway, can't change the past, we're on to the third encounter now, with Prince the android. Now I don't think I've used one of these guys since I played the game when it first launched, and I wasn't really planning on using them here. We've been doing so well, I didn't think we'd need them. I got a little bit arrogant, I guess, and this means I haven't bothered equipping this thing with any useful items. Like we could have given it a grenade, a medikit, stuff like that. Instead, he's got nothing. I have equipped some upgrades that give him things like extra armor and movement, but even that I didn't really plan on needing. I was just doing it to play around with the mechanics and see how these android upgrades actually work. So I guess it's lucky I did that. Assuming we survive the nightmare fuel that's about to befall us, I need to give this android some better gear when we get back to the HQ. For right now though, the Gatekeeper resurrects a stupid amount of zombies. At first I'm worried about this, especially since we've used the Motile Inducer and Team Up just to survive that second encounter, so I'm thinking we're going to get overwhelmed. Our options are limited here. However, Patchwork is the perfect counter to the Giant Egg's shenanigans. Chain Lightning will jump from enemy to enemy, and because of this, she's able to dispose of all but 2 of the zombies in a single attack. Plus, the turret gets one shot in the process. It is a beautiful sight to behold. I think Patchwork just saved all our lives. Now I am worried about Claymore. He's low on health, but times are desperate. I still decide to charge him out to the front line in order to finish the mech. It's one of those scenarios where sometimes the best defense is a good offense. Now Prince, our robot boy, can use Subdue, so he's not entirely useless, but yeah, I'd obviously much rather have Cherub. Now I've sent him out to the front out of cover to serve as the robot equivalent of a meat shield. A metal shield, I guess. But the Gatekeeper actually ignores our robotic boy and instead raises some more zombies, these ones having over double the HP of the previous. Now that being said, there is only 2 of them instead of like the half a dozen that we had before, but even so, it's not great. Then I discover something really interesting. Somehow Zephyr still hasn't used her Turncoat Grenade. These are an extremely useful item that will inflict a Berserk on targets in an AoE. Now Berserk will not only cause enemy units to attack each other, afterwards most of them panic and will lose their next turn. So it gives us a free attack the enemies make on our behalf, and it also inflicts stun. Now it does have some caveats, like robotic enemies are immune to it, and trust me, do not ever use these things on chrysalids. It will not end well. But for most enemies, these things can totally shut them down while giving us a free attack. They are fantastic. And it's another item we can only gain access to after beating the Progeny. So yeah, the Progeny research is just really good. Now all of that I knew, but what I didn't realise is that the Turncoat Grenade also destroys the Gatekeeper's zombies, the same way a Flashbang or Frostbomb would in XCOM 2. I already thought these were one of the best items in the game, and it turns out they're even more powerful than I realised. In one fell swoop, Zephyr eliminates 3 enemies and shuts down another 2. And just like Patch earlier, that may have just saved this mission. Pretty soon we're down to just the Andromedon and the Gatekeeper. Patchwork can stasis the Gatekeeper, giving us a full round of combat to finish the Andromedon. And once it's gone, we then turn our attention to the Death Sphere. And it comes down to the wire. Prince moves in for a Subdue, and if he can roll max damage, we win. Now of course, he doesn't, so the Keeper survives. And I was worried here. I'm thinking Claymore, being so slow moving, wouldn't be able to reach the Gatekeeper for his own Subdue attack. I'm worried for nothing as he can just get there and obliterate the big boy. So we are victorious, but it's by the skin of our teeth. The fact we had to use an android at all is very telling. And I always find Sacred Coil the toughest of the 3 factions to deal with. That final mission especially is just bonkers with how many enemies can spawn in. Hopefully Grey Phoenix will be a bit easier. During this time, if it's a single encounter mission, we're deploying both Shelter and Verge. Now this does make the deployments more difficult, but on single encounter missions we can go all out using consumable items as well as the team up ability. This way the higher level soldiers can usually keep things locked down pretty well. And even the lower level boys can carry Turncoat Grenades, which are even more useful against Grey Phoenix, since this faction doesn't tend to deploy robotic enemies. So while the missions are more difficult than what they would be otherwise, they're still very much manageable. Meanwhile, for the multi-encounter missions, we're going to want to use the best troops we have. So training up the top units to unlock their extra abilities is a matter of timing. We want to send them in for training during a period where we only have single encounter missions. That way Verge and Shelter can fill in for their absence without making things too dangerous. And it gives our psionic boys some much needed XP of their own as well. Now during this time, we have a Rescue the VIP mission on this highway map. And, well, a few things go wrong here. First up is the buff we're receiving. The last unit to breach gains Overwatch. Now I'm thinking this is no big deal since it's a one encounter mission, so I just placed Cherub last with the intention of using Team Up on him to bump him up in the queue right behind Patch. This will mean he can act before any of the enemies and that will remove his Overwatch. Now it's all well and good in theory, the problem is I used the Motile Inducer on Shelter. This is his first mission with the Soulfire ability, meaning that he can actually attack beyond using Subdue, so I'm keen to try out this new skill, and, well, spoiler alert, it kind of sucks. It has a cooldown, so once he attacks with Soulfire, he's not using it again for quite a while. So that's disappointing, little bit underwhelmed with that one. But see, what's even worse is that we use Shelter's Relocate ability swapping places with an enemy. With the temporal shift upgrade, it actually pushes the enemy's turn down the queue when we swap positions with them, so it's a really good support ability. But what I didn't realise is that swapping positions will trigger Cherub's Overwatch. So just like that, we failed the challenge. Our shield boy has used his pistol. Now I figured teleporting with Shelter would be fine. After all, the codexes teleport in XCOM 2 and that doesn't trigger Overwatch. But things are different in this game it seems, so I end up reloading the turn. We do everything the same on the reload, minus using the relocate ability of course. As the mission proceeds, I need to explain how these Protect the VIP missions work. Now our overall objective is to have our troops, as well as the VIP, make it to the set evac zone. Each round of combat, one enemy will be targeting the VIP, and the game will let you know which bad guy it is by displaying this icon over their head. The idea is we need to either eliminate or otherwise hinder this enemy to prevent them from going after the VIP. And this information is going to be important in just a moment. But for right now, after Cherub has had his turn, we don't have to worry about him overwatching anymore, so that's a good thing. I then use Verge's Stupor ability on the Faceless. This removes one action point from the enemy on its turn. Now there is a chance to stun for both of the opponent's actions, but we get unlucky here. And this information is also going to be important in just a second. See, before long, Shelter's regular turn arrives in the queue, and once again we use Relocate, this time on the Faceless. And this turns out to be a disaster. Even though the Faceless isn't flagged as the enemy targeting the VIP, well, since it's right next to them and it has only one action point... Yeah, I'm guessing because the Faceless couldn't move and attack, it instead chose just to attack, and the VIP was the only available target. And it's doing this even though it shouldn't be targeting the VIP, since it's not the indicated enemy that's going after the VIP. So I'm chalking this one up to jank, and I am not including it in the failed mission count. I mean, this is the first mission that we failed the whole run, and it's only happened because the game is giving bad information. So yeah, forget that, I'm calling shenanigans, but it does mean 2 reloads in a single mission because of weird things happening. So things are certainly not going well on this one. I think this is the biggest disaster of a mission in the whole run so far, which is pretty crazy seeing as we've taken on Sacred Coil already. Anyway, speaking of jank, what on earth is Verge doing here? You look how I feel, man. Now we do end up winning, but certainly the most problematic encounter we've had to date. And Cherub using Overwatch, I mean that's just because I didn't understand the relocate mechanics, and the Faceless targeting the VIP was just the usual XCOM style nonsense. So I'm thinking our strategies are still working, it's just curveballs that are causing problems. So I'm not too worried, I think we should be good moving forward. Now we soon have a similar mission where we have to grab some loot and then make it to the evac zone. Things once again go wrong here, but in this instance it is 100% my fault. Shelter is right by the exit. We literally just have to move him like 3 tiles and he's in the clear, he can make it to safety. Instead, I make the monumentally stupid blunder of thinking Soulfire doesn't end the turn. And it's like, I've got the cost-based ability colors mod for this exact reason. Like it's telling me there's a yellow border, that means it's going to end the turn. But that doesn't stop me from completely ignoring that information, using Soulfire and ending Shelter's turn. Such a silly play, I should have just ran him out of there. I've just created this problem where there doesn't need to be any. So long story short, our bro who could have easily survived instead gets sent into bleed out. And that causes us to win the mission. Yeah, apparently if all the other units have escaped and someone gets murked, it's still a victory. Now I'm not really sure how much sense that makes, like we literally left the guy bleeding to death and surrounded by hostile forces, but nah, apparently he's fine. Okay, all that happens is Shelter has a grave wound that we can remove with a couple of days in the training center, so there's no need to worry. My mistake turns out to be nothing more than a slight inconvenience, but definitely not the best play from me here. Despite the setbacks, before too long it's time for the final Grey Phoenix mission. And for this one, of course we're going in with a team of max level troops. No low level soldiers on this one. By this point, Claymore actually gets 2 uses of any explosives that he carries thanks to the heavy ordnance ability. And this extends to the motile inducer, so we'll actually be able to use it twice, and that is just brilliant. The downside is that Patch is usually the soldier in the front of our turn queue, and here, when we're breaching through a security door, she actually has to be the first. That means we're going to have to wait until Claymore's turn before we can use the inducer. Now generally, getting extra actions early in the fight when the enemy's numbers are the highest is a lot more useful than later on in the fight. Now I'm hoping it won't make too much of a difference, but it does. See, this Dominator stuns Claymore for 2 actions, so he's not doing anything until the second round of combat. And with him down, the bad guys get 4 turns in a row. So needless to say, we start taking significant damage. And we are getting overwhelmed here. The only good news is the enemies keep moving towards Patchwork, and every time they do, Voltaic Arc triggers, giving us free damage. And that's the one good thing about having so many enemies swarming us. Voltaic Arc is damaging just about all of them. So once we survive this initial onslaught, I'm thinking we should be okay. So on Patch's turn, she finishes off 3 enemies at once just by repositioning. You gotta love Voltaic Arc. And even better, these electric attacks ignore armor, so the Praetorian's armor up ability does absolutely nothing to protect it. And in one turn, she's just smoked over half the enemy's team. And yeah, we've pretty much won this encounter at this point. By the time Claymore's turn finally does come around, we don't really need to use the motile inducer, but I do want to test something, so we use it anyway. And we do the same with his plasma grenade, which also has 2 charges. And yeah, it's an easy win at this point. Patchwork has taken far more damage than what I'm comfortable with, but we are still in a good position overall. In the second encounter, our goal is to take down Crew Chief Yavo as quickly as possible. He calls in reinforcements, and the longer he lives, the more difficult the battle becomes. Now the problem is he's behind a shield wall, so we need to disable that quickly, but preferably after he's had his turn in the queue. While the shield's up, we may not be able to attack him, but he can't attack us either, so we want to maximize the time between the shield going down and his next turn. That's going to give us the most time possible to take him out before he can do anything to us. Anyway, since we've taken the motile inducer off Patch, I've equipped her with the relocation disc instead. I wasn't sure if this would combo with Voltaic Arc, but it turns out it does, so that's an extra opportunity to deal that proximity damage. Our girl hits the first of 2 switches for the shield while hitting every enemy minus Yavo himself with Chaining Jolt. I've mentioned Patch is my favourite unit, right? On Claymore's turn, I'm sad to see our Plasma and Motile Inducer haven't gained an extra charge. We have the improved explosives ability, but it doesn't seem to have worked here. And maybe it can only recharge the grenades from 0 to 1 charge? I don't know, but this did bum me out a little bit. And yes, choosing a difficult story mission to test this theory was probably not the smartest play on my part, but I think we'll persevere anyway, so it should be fine. Hopefully. Now, another use of the Motile Inducer allows Cherub to deactivate the shield completely, and straight after that, our shield boy has his regular turn and can bring the fight to Yavo. Now, the boss is similar to a Praetorian, but he has the additional buff that he's immune to Torque's tongue pull ability, so we can't use that cheese to just shut him down straight away. But even despite that, we can still deal with him easily enough. It's the reinforcements that make this encounter challenging, but if we can deal with this guy before they arrive, he's pretty much just a slightly more difficult Praetorian, and that's nothing that we can't handle. So now it's time for the final encounter, and I've never actually played this one before, so let's see what we're in for. First things first, the plasma grenade has recharged, but the Motile Inducer hasn't. So the Inducer counts as a grenade for some abilities, but not others. And regular viewers know just how much I love inconsistency in games. But we won't worry about that because we actually have a bigger problem. Cherub's Shield Bash and Claymore's Bombs are the only abilities we have that can damage the reactors that we need to destroy. They're environmental objects, so a lot of our attacks don't work on them. Now, I figure taking these things out as quickly as possible is the best approach, so I actually opt to ignore Kinetic Shield with Cherub, and that's something I almost never do. Instead, we're just going to yellow dash in and destroy the first reactor immediately. Once we neutralize one reactor, another will appear, and this cycle will continue until we've taken down all 4 of them. Now, fortunately, Torque actually has a frag grenade, our insurance against forced overwatch, but given this is the last encounter, we don't have to worry about that. So we can use the grenade to blow up the second reactor quicker than I expected. So this is going well. However, at the end of the first round of combat, we have a sectopod making its arrival. Now, I expected one of these things to show up at some point, so it wasn't a surprise, but it is still pretty horrible. And things are getting desperate enough that I decide lobbing a shrapnel bomb at the Faceless is more important than getting Claymore into cover. Even from the sectopod, our boy should be able to tank a hit or 2. And yeah, just getting rid of those enemies, that's the bigger priority right now. Voltaic Arc can then save Cherub from a Viper's bind, an enemy Viper that is, and then I opt for Capacitor Discharge on the Sectopod. Now, I don't know if this attack has a chance to stun robotic enemies, but I figure it's worth a try, and sure enough, we do not get a stun. So a little bit disappointing on that one. Now with Cherub, I again use the yellow dash to destroy the next reactor. I'm not sure if reinforcements are going to keep coming in until we destroy these things, but I'm guessing that's probably how it works. Now, ignoring the sectopod does come with obvious drawbacks. For example, having it rain molten death down on our boy, scoring a crit and shredding his armor. But that's the price that we gotta pay to get rid of those reactors. Now, meanwhile, Claymore has once again been stunned by a Dominator, but this time it's thankfully only for a single action, not both. And one action is all he needs to lob a shrapnel bomb at the final reactor. And it's kind of ironic. The whole reason I brought Claymore on this one was because I figured his bombs would help in shredding the sectopod, but he keeps getting shut down and he isn't able to do anything to the big robot at all. Just one of those cases where things don't always go to plan. Anyway, with the reactors gone, sure enough, the incoming reinforcements are cancelled. So my suspicion was correct, and I think getting rid of them quickly was the right call. Now we can just focus on the remaining enemies. With its next turn, the Sectopod uses Wrath Cannon. Now what I love about this attack in this game is that it actually tells you where the attack is going to land. What a novel concept. That's at least one thing this game does better than XCOM 2. And this one is a delayed attack, so we have time to escape the blast zone before we get hit. By the Sectopod's third attack, and yes, it has survived long enough to have a third attack, both Cherub and Patchwork have kinetic shields up. I've finally been able to do that. But the Sectopod is too smart and it targets the unshielded Torque instead. Just brutal. And I will also mention, I have tried to use stasis on the Sectopod, but apparently we can't do that in this game. So that sucks. We found one of Patchwork's few weaknesses. Then something really weird happens here. I move Patch in on the Dominator, both because the Dominator is being super annoying, but also to keep her away from the Sectopod, out of its line of sight. And the thing is, she gets mind controlled. Now that's probably not too surprising, being face to face with a Dominator. The thing is, Torque can take out the Dominator and that gives us control of Patchwork again, and for some reason, Patch gets an extra turn immediately. The turn queue says we're still using Torque, but we're in control of Patchwork. So I have no idea what is going on here. Is this intended behavior or a glitch? Whatever, it's a free attack for us on the Sectopod, so of course I'm going to take it. On its turn, the Sectopod again targets poor Torque, who has no shield to defend herself. This thing is just relentless. But after that, we can finally finish it off. Now, pretty tough encounter here, and Torque is gravely wounded, which honestly isn't too surprising with the amount of damage that she's taken. The main issue is the final missions with the fourth faction trigger immediately. So if we want to use her on those deployments, we're not going to have time to heal her up in the training center. Her injury gives a debuff to her will points. It's not great, but it's better than a debuff to movement or dodge, so we should be okay. We're still going to bring her along for the final encounter. And speaking of that, yeah, it's time to take on the Shrike faction. And just as a side note, I'm reading my script here, and instead of Shrike faction, I've written Strike Action. That's, like, not even that close. Whatever. It's 2 missions, and they have to be done back to back on consecutive days, so there's no downtime in between. And I struggle a bit deciding whether to bring Claymore or Zephyr. Ultimately, I decide to go with Claymore since I'm thinking 2 uses of the Mobile Inducer is just too good to pass up. The first encounter here is bonkers. There's so many enemies, the turn queue can't even fit on the screen. So yeah, that's when you know things are serious. And by this point in the game, I have been using the preparation ability, not a lot, but maybe more than most people would use it. This gives the unit some defense bonuses, but it also pushes their next turn up in the queue. Now this can be helpful for Cherub in particular. If he's not able to reach anyone to attack them after he uses Kinetic Shield, preparation can be a good option to go for. It allows us to get off a second Kinetic Shield sooner than we'd normally be able to, and that's going to help keep our troops safe. And sometimes, yeah, that is a better option than just moving him forward. Because the thing is, we need to be kept safe here. The enemies in particular seem to really dislike Patchwork. The majority of them are completely ignoring the rest of the team and gunning for her. Now, given how powerful she is, it's actually a good move on their part, but it is a problem for us. Speaking of problems, Torque misses a 97% tongue pull here. Yeah, that's XCOM, baby. Now, I've been trying to avoid using any consumables since it's only the first encounter. We've got another 2 to go, but both Cherub and Patchwork are just taking way too much damage. The enemy count is just absurd here. So it's time to use a turncoat grenade, get some of those enemies working for us. We can also use Patch's relocation disc for free voltaic arc damage. And then something that really starts turning the tide in our favour is targeting the paladins. See, these things have a mind merge ability similar to the Priest's Holy Warrior skill in XCOM 2. The problem for these guys is that unlike priests, they do not have use of sustain. So when we eliminate them, which we can do pretty easily, the unit they're buffing with Mind Merge goes to the Shadow Realm with them. So we're kind of getting rid of 2 bad guys for the price of 1. And while this is really good for us, we're not out of the woods just yet. Poor Patch gets reduced to a measly 4 HP. Thankfully it is her turn, so we can heal her up with her medikit, but I'm concerned she's gonna be gravely wounded after taking all of this damage, and I would hate for her to suffer a debuff for the final mission that we're gonna do straight after this one. But nothing we can do about it, so we're just gonna have to push on. And the other thing I should say here is medikits in general are just really useful in this encounter because they provide immunity to poison. And some of these cobras waste their turns using poison spit, which doesn't actually hurt us. So eventually we are able to clear the area, but yeah, Patch has taken way too many hits. I'm honestly not feeling too confident about the rest of the fight, to the point that we actually burn through our only use of team up at the start of the second encounter. I really don't want Patch taking any more hits, so we need to be aggressive here. So that means Claymore is up next, and I accidentally destroy Patch's cover with his explosives. In my attempt to protect her, I've made things far, far worse for her. Once again, not my greatest play. Luckily, Cherub's turn is up soon and he can give her a kinetic shield, so that should help keep her safe. And sure enough, his shield does indeed keep her safe, at least for 1 attack. She still gets hit with a second. But you know, 1's better than 0. Then Torque finally gets her turn, and she's the difference maker we need. She poisons a couple of the Shrike goons to terminate them and then binds the remaining Muton. So I think that's 3 enemies that she's neutralized with her turn alone. And at that point there's only a couple of bad guys left and we clean them up pretty easily. Now this encounter actually went much better than the parking lot, and it's probably because there were less enemies that we had to deal with. Either way, that leaves us with the final encounter, and we still have 2 charges of the Motile Inducer, plus Claymore's regained a charge of his Plasma Grenade. And with this arsenal at our disposal, well yeah, this one's a bit of a beatdown. The good part about struggling in the first encounter is that we've been able to save so many of our consumables, and now we can unleash an absurd amount of power here. Both Patch and Cherub gain free turns from the Motile Inducer right off the bat. Patch is doing crazy damage on the robotic enemies with her electric attacks, and meanwhile Cherub still has his Turncoat Grenade and he can shut down multiple enemies at once. Not to mention we've also got the onslaught of explosives from Claymore himself. So these guys are being hit with 3 of our top soldiers all at once. Also, an interesting fact here, Torque's poison spit detonates Claymore's shrapnel bombs. So placing her in the turn order right after Claymore could potentially be a powerful combo. I've probably learned that a little bit too late for this run, but in the future it's good to know. And all this is to say, I don't think the enemies land a single attack on us for the whole encounter. And even better than that, after the mission is done, Patch has avoided gravely wounded status. So yeah, this has gone brilliantly. Honestly, as good as I could have asked for. And with that, it's now just the final mission to take down Shrike for good. And this deployment is 4 encounters, the biggest of the game, so the difficulty is definitely being ramped up, as we would expect for the final mission. We used the relocation disc right away. I don't want to rack up damage early on this time, so I'm going to be a bit more liberal with using the consumables. And being able to use Voltaic Arc, Stasis, and Chaining Jolt all in one turn is a really powerful opening play to start the fight. In fact, I find it so powerful, we actually burn through Team Up on Cherub's turn to let Patchwork act again, and she continues wreaking havoc with her electric attacks. Plus, she now has a shield from Cherub. So yeah, we're doing a lot better out of the gate on this one. I also figure using both of Claymore's plasma grenades on the first encounter is probably the best approach. We'll only benefit from his improvised explosives ability if we have 0 grenades left. So there's really no point in saving them. We might as well go all out. And all these things lead to us taking 0 damage in the first encounter. so let's hope all of them go this well. Now the second encounter is a bit more challenging. We need to grab the elevator key and then book it to the elevator itself. And while this is happening, reinforcements are on the way. And like I've said earlier, these missions where we have to move rapidly are usually the most difficult. The good news with this scenario in particular is that the reinforcements that arrive are androids. So with Patchwork, we can take one of those reinforcements for ourselves. Now I am worried about this Dominator. I would have loved to have taken this thing out, but it's just too far out of the way on our path to the elevator. Cherub has fallen behind the rest of the crew, and if he gets mind controlled here, well that could be really bad. Then we're going to have to backtrack to take this thing out, and who knows how many reinforcements are going to come in by the time we do that. Fortunately, the Dominator goes for side disable instead of mind control, and even better than that, its attack doesn't even work. Cherub just shrugs it off. Our boy is perfectly fine. So this one wasn't quite as good as the first encounter since we took, I think, a single point of damage, but it's certainly nothing that we can't handle. The third encounter though, well, this one starts off badly when we have the breach buff that gives everyone Overwatch. We've already used Torque's frag grenade, so even that's not an option to get rid of the Overwatch. So what the heck are we gonna do? Well, I'm not really happy with it, but the plan is to use up both charges of the motile inducer. It absolutely sucks that we're not going to have this thing for the final fight, but it's the only way I can see to keep the challenge alive. We need to have our soldiers acting before they can shoot with Overwatch, so we don't have much of a choice. So Claymore is going to act first, and he gives both Torque and Patchwork a free turn each with the inducer. Now that obviously still leaves Cherub on Overwatch. The plan here is to use Torque's tongue pull. See, by using it on one of our own units, Torque's tag team ability actually gives the moved soldier a free action. That allows us to remove the Overwatch on Cherub, and now we don't have to worry about detonating any explosives on any of our troops. And because we've used the motile inducer twice, giving us 2 sets of extra actions, as you might expect, this first group of enemies gets absolutely destroyed. I mean, our entire squad had at least one action before the enemies got to do literally anything, so they never really had a chance. The problem with this fight is that 2 waves of reinforcements come in, and they are big waves. Like, look at this group of mutons, it is horrifying. But once again, the more of them there are, the more of them are going to be hit by chain lightning. So that's something at least. Then on Torque's turn, I'm wanting to poison a whole bunch of the bad guys, but sadly her spit attack is still just 1 turn off cooldown. Really annoying. Now it's still not too bad, she can at least use her tongue pull and bind to shut down the Praetorian. But before we're even close to being done with the mutons, the second wave of reinforcements arrives. This time it's a heap of snacks, and some purifiers for some reason. And I mean, just look at the turn queue. There's just way too many enemies here, and we do start taking damage. And it's a lot of damage. The criminals throw a grenade at us and then apply Rooted on Patchwork, so she can't even run away from the explosive. Yeah, these guys really do not like Patchwork, do they? And it gets to the point where I figure inflicting damage is better than avoiding taking damage. I mean, we're gonna take damage anyway, so who cares, right? And I actually leave Claymore in the blast radius of the explosive and just start throwing as many shrapnel bombs as we can. However, it turns out he's not actually in the blast radius anyway, so it turns out to be a moot point. Not for Patchwork, of course. She's barely clinging on to life at this point. Now, I'm worried about our girl taking another hit before we can heal her. I do not want to have to replace her with an android for the final encounter. So Cherub is going to charge out to the front line to draw the enemy's attacks. It sucks for him, but he's got a lot more HP to spare, so I think it's the best move. And it seems to work as Patchwork does survive to her turn, at which point she can heal herself up with a medikit. After that, she can then save Claymore from an enemy bind attack by taking out one of the Pythons. Now, the remaining Python wants revenge on her for eliminating its sibling, and this was its biggest mistake. Shout out if you got that reference. See, the Python uses its tongue pull on Patch, which of course is going to trigger Voltaic Arc, and the snack is just instantly eliminated. And this got a good chuckle out of me on stream. Voltaic Arc is just so busted in the best way possible. Now Cherub meanwhile is burning from the Purifier, that's the price he paid for saving Patch, and while we could remove the status with his medikit, that's actually a mistake. See, he's surrounded by flames, so as soon as we move him, he's just going to be set on fire again. And yes, I did learn this the hard way earlier in the run. Now fortunately, by now we're down to a 3-on-1 mugging. Torque still has the Praetorian in her clutches, and so it's the rest of our squad against this one Purifier. Plus, Kinetic Shield still works while burning, so that's something Cherub can do this turn. But as far as actually attacking, we're gonna leave it to the rest of the team. See, unlike Shield Bash, the Subdue ability still works even while burning. So it doesn't matter if the other soldiers get set on fire, they can still take out the Purifier, this guy's done. And with that, it's time for the final stand. Now I am a bit worried about Patchwork's low health, to the point that I opt to start the fight with Cherub, even though Patch is arguably the better choice for that spot by this point in the game. My thinking is that Cherub can give a shield to Patchwork before any bad guys get to act, and that should help keep her alive. But there's something even more interesting going on here. Cherub's turncoat grenade is back. We used that thing ages ago, so why does he still have it? I mean, you can bet that I'm going to use it immediately. I'm not going to ask questions, but it is weird. And then the same thing happens with Patch. Her turncoat grenade is also back, as well as her medikit and her relocation disc. They're all available to be used again. It seems our consumables have been replenished. And once again, I have no idea if this is a glitch or if it is intended behavior. But it does leave me with one question. I am really curious what's going to happen when we get to Claymore's turn. You've got to be kidding me. Both charges of the motile inducer are back. This is insane. Shrike just lost the battle. 2 free turns plus Claymore's arsenal of grenades. Yeah, these guys are done. Patchwork and Cherub are our go-to with the motile inducer. It's just more damage with Patch and more shields with Cherub. Plus, Claymore himself can use his explosives to cause a lot of damage on Sovereign, who is Shrike's leader. Now this guy does have the sustain ability, so he survives, but who cares? He's on a pittance of HP, and our other soldiers have completely obliterated the Shrike forces. Once Sovereign is out of his safety bubble, we can easily remove that final point of HP, and the big boss of the entire game turns out to be a bit of a joke. It's honestly the Ronin in this fight that is actually far more threatening. Of course it's going to get a million turns because that's what these guys do, but on top of that, his Lightning Reflexes ability protect him from Voltaic Arc. So while Patch has been dealing crazy damage to the rest of the enemies by all those turns we've given her, this guy's been able to avoid most of it. The good news, however, is that unlike when we were facing Sacred Coil, there's only a single Ronin here, and one of these guys is much easier to deal with than multiple. And he seems to realise that he's in trouble as he randomly runs out the side of the building and off the map. Now, placement glitches in general are super annoying in this game. It seems to happen almost every mission that you have a unit who runs to a random tile, only to then teleport to the spot they're actually supposed to be occupying. But this one is just on a whole other level. Like, what kind of training regime does this guy have that he can run this far? Anyway, he is still on the battlefield as much as it looks like he's not. He's just had to make a production out of his movement. So let's send him to the Shadow Realm. The poison damage from Torque finishes him off, and that's it. We've beaten XCOM Chimera Squad without using guns. Sticky Bomb notwithstanding, of course. And I gotta say, I had a lot of fun with this one. Going in, I wasn't really sure how difficult or easy this was going to be. And apart from a handful of story missions, it wasn't too tough. Apart from that jank with the faceless, we didn't actually lose a single mission for the whole game. And so while it wasn't too difficult, it did present some interesting scenarios, and we had to use a bit of creative thinking to get round them. And that's the main thing that I really enjoy about doing challenge runs. So this was a really fun experience. I know I've been critical of this game in the past, and it does have its problems, but the core gameplay is solid. To the point that I actually already have another challenge run in mind that I'd like to try with this game. So we'll see if you guys enjoy this video, and if you do, maybe I'll play some more Chimera Squad on the channel. If that's something you'd like to see, please leave a like and comment on the video, as well as subscribing to the channel. Also, Patreon supporters and YouTube members receive early access to these videos, and it only costs a few bucks a month. So consider signing up to one of those if you want to further support my work and get some nice perks. The last thing I'll say is apologies if my voice was a little bit grainier than usual for parts of this video. I've been a bit sick lately, I'm still recovering. Hopefully it was still okay to listen to. And beyond that, I think I'm done. So thank you very much for watching, and until next time, have a great day.